This is a video on writing theme statements and analyzing theme for you to use to study in preparation for Tuesday's test or assessment. Make sure you listen to all of this because several of these things that I'm discussing here will be very important for your test. I'm even giving you an example graphic organizer. This will look just like the graphic organizer on the test, as well as some of the items for level 3 that I'm going to discuss and explain here in just a couple minutes. First, I want to review these slides. I found this in an online resource that's very useful, so check this out. About writing theme statements and analyzing theme. Theme is the central message of a literary work. It is the idea the author wishes to convey about that subject. It is expressed as a sentence or a general statement about life or human nature. This is where you get the idea of the human condition. A theme is only a theme as long as it is universal, as long as it applies to virtually every human being, or at least gives a statement that could apply to many people within society. A literary work can have more than one theme, and most themes are not directly stated but are implied. So you're not going to have the same thematic idea possibly as the person next to you or the 25 other people in the classroom, but instead it could be very different, but it's still rooted in the same text. Likewise, if you have the same thematic idea as the person next to you, it's also very possible that you do not have the exact same thematic statement, because that text message about that particular thematic idea can vary slightly from student to student, from person to person in his or her analysis. The reader must think about all the elements of the work, in other words, multiple literary elements, not just characterization, not just plot, but instead a grouping of those things such as plot and characterization and setting and various other rhetorical elements, and use them to make inferences or reasonable guesses as to which themes seem to be implied. A theme is not the subject. So, in other words, the theme is not the thematic idea. Courage, survival, war, and pride are all thematic ideas, but they are not the theme. The theme is instead a statement about the thematic idea or the topic or subject. For example, love, if taken to extremes, can be negative rather than positive. While in a different novel, the same thematic idea could express a different message, such as love can conquer even the greatest evil. You'll notice here that the thematic idea or topic in both of these novels is the same, but the message each respective author conveys in the novel is different based on that work. So, a theme is that statement. It is not a moral, a directive, or an order. So if it sounds like what you're writing sounds like you're telling someone to do something or to make a certain choice, then that is not a theme, but it's instead stated more like a moral. So, a moral, a directive, or order tells us how to behave or what to do. A theme avoids judging what people should or should not do. People should make the most of each day and every day. No, should and ought to are not language that you should use in writing a thematic statement. It's also not appropriate to give a directive or order such as be nice to elderly people or love like there's no tomorrow. You hear how each of these are telling the audience, the person to whom you are speaking or writing, what to do, and that's not theme. Themes are not trite sayings or cliches such as actions speak louder than words, or love hurts, or absence makes the heart grow fonder. Those are very cliche and are not statements of what a text theme is. Themes do not refer to the specific names or events of a particular literary piece. It also does not summarize a work. Summary is a separate thing that is important to help develop a theme. However, it should not be part of a theme. Themes avoid absolute terms such as all, none, everything, or always, because themes, like human life, recognize that life is complex and that much of what the human experience involves degrees. What does a strong theme look like? For example, courage allows people to attempt difficult tasks in their lives, and then you'll notice the qualifier beginning with the words even when there is a chance of failing. So difficult tasks, we attempt those, or courage allows people to attempt those in their lives. That is a basic theme statement, But where it becomes more complex is when you consider the qualifier, or a specific instance, or in certain situations where this is especially considerable. Another example is independence is necessary to grow up, though it can be scary at times. And so with those, you'll notice that there are still with each of those there is a qualifier. In this instance, it's though it can be scary at times. That makes this independence is necessary to grow up a little meatier. It's a little bit more complex because of that qualifier. Now I'm going to take you to the graphic organizer and the format of what a level 3 portion of your test will be like when you're doing your analyzing theme assessment. At that level 3 mark, you're going to be given a text. And in this instance, I have told you that it will be a cold read text, a section from the Scarlet Letter written by Nathaniel Hawthorne. It is my expectation that you're going to be able to read just that portion of the text to be able to identify characters, plot, as well as rhetorical elements and setting. And within each of those areas, you should still, even though it's an excerpt and not the entire text, be able to identify thematic ideas and come up with a thematic statement based on that excerpt. I also would be able to do the same, and so what I'm asking you to be able to do is no different than what I have already done in my mind in preparation for your test. With that said, you have read The Outcasts of Poker Flat. I'm using The Outcasts of Poker Flat in this instance to provide you with the thought processes that you need to do while you're completing your test. So, on your test, you will see thematic ideas evident in this excerpt, and it says to record at least 3 below. So I took The Outcasts of Poker Flat, as I had it in front of me, and I analyzed it, and I read it, and I said, okay, within this excerpt, there are at least these 3 thematic ideas. Hypocrisy, and I was thinking hypocrisy in community or society because the hypocrisy was mostly seen in the city or the town of Poker Flat, not in the wilderness where those people were. So I said in society to sort of just in my mind prepare myself to think about the community as opposed to the outcasts themselves. I also noticed the thematic idea of knowledge, that is, having knowledge, but yet without action. So I think this was seen in especially the character, John Oakhurst, but I do believe it also could be seen in a couple other elements of the story, especially with plot. Empathy is the third one that I recorded, and I said toward those who are mistreated in parentheses just to kind of remind myself of where I wanted to go. The actual thematic idea is empathy, so you do not have to have what is in parentheses unless you are also thinking in advance, how will I take this in what direction will I take this in my thematic statement? And I went ahead and added a fourth one for the sake of example, and this was reputation, because the story does focus a lot on bad reputations, and basically this is definitely something that people in our society have to deal with. At times we have a bad reputation among one or two or many, many more people, depending on who that person is, a friend or an enemy, or the whole of a society or a portion of society, and which portion it is. So I have selected from those this thematic idea, empathy. And this sequence of actions or steps so far is the same as what you have done in previous activities with the Masque of the Red Death and analyzing characters and plot and setting there. It's also the same steps of the process when you were working on the group analysis of the characters of the Outcasts of Poker Flat, with the poster and the post-mortem of a protagonist and so on. So now the step is going to be to write a thematic statement. Now, as in ordering this, I went ahead and put these things at the front end. Obviously, you're going to have already analyzed and read and kind of internally analyzed the text. Feel free to absolutely write on the provided excerpt, because that annotation process is important for you to be able to digest information and for the analysis to take place. So, this thematic statement should be based on the thematic idea that you have selected, empathy. It should usually begin with that idea of empathy, and or of whatever thematic idea it is that you've chosen. And you'll hear this, you'll hear the universality of this, how it applies to everyone. You'll also hear the message within this, and you will also notice that there's a qualifier within this as well. Empathy shared between those who are harshly judged by society builds valuable friendships among people who otherwise might never feel appreciated. So the gist of this, in other words, the shortest part of this, the nugget of theme statement is empathy builds valuable friendships, right? I mean, that's the basic. So what qualifies this is going to be the shared between those who are harshly judged by society, because I think that's an important component, and then also the among people who otherwise might not feel appreciated. And so this is the direction that I went. Now, once you have analyzed thematic ideas, you've selected and narrowed it just to one, and then written a thematic statement that is based on your analysis of multiple literary elements, now I want you to explain how it is that you arrived to that conclusion. So let's take a look at how I have modeled this as well. So I selected my evidence. In this evidence, only Mother Shipton, once the strongest of the party, seemed to sicken and fade. At midnight on the 10th day, she called Oakhurst to her side. "I'm going," she said, in a voice of querulous weakness. "But don't say anything about it. Don't waken the kids. Take the bundle from under my head and open it." And as you know, it had her rations, and she says to give it to Piney. And the gambler, Oakhurst, says, "You've starved yourself," in observation of that. Now, you will record once again that thematic idea, because I want you to demonstrate to me and to remind yourself and me that you are staying true to proving this based on the evidence that you have then entered onto your page, into your organizer. The reasoning should explain how the evidence represents that thematic idea, or not just that thematic idea, but the thematic statement that's up here. So, characterization is the literary element I have chosen. On your sheet, there's going to be a blank. You're going to write characterization, or plot, or setting, or rhetorical elements. What will you write in that blank? It is up to you, but remember, to get a 3 on the scale, you need to have ample, multiple literary elements, and I would strongly suggest at least 3. Okay? So, with that being said, let me come back to my example and look for the idea of empathy and how it builds friendships among people who aren't appreciated. Mother Shipton was once a hateful, filthy-mouthed woman who did not seem to care much for others, but during the days in exile in the wilderness outside Poker Flat, she develops a heart for the others who were mistreated like her. This is seen in her sacrificing her own health to afford Piney some extra time to survive. Do you see the empathy there? Though she does not want others to know what she has done, John Oakhurst knows, and his observation that she has starved herself is enough to see that he appreciates her. Now, the appreciation part is, might never feel appreciated. He feels appreciated on behalf of the others, especially because of the sacrifices she has made, because she empathizes with them. And that was an analysis of characterization. Next, setting. Now, in this instance, Tom Simpson seemed to enjoy the prospect of their enforced seclusion. We'll have a good camp for a week, and then the snow will melt, and we'll all go back together. The cheerful gaiety of the young man and Mr. Oakhurst's calm infected the others. The innocent, with the aid of pine boughs, extended a thatch for the roofless cabin, and the Duchess directed Piney in the rearrangement of the interior with a taste and tact that opened the blue eyes of that provincial maiden at their fullest extent. So once again, you would record the exact same thematic idea to remind yourself and me of the focus of your reasoning and your evidence. And what this reasoning should do is it should explain this evidence, how this evidence conveys this thematic idea, but particularly this thematic statement, the building friendships and the feeling of being appreciated as a result of the empathy that comes from one or all of the different folks within that scene. But how does setting do this? So let's look at the reasoning. The outcasts being trapped by the terrain and the accumulating snow allows them to interact more than they would on an open, undisturbed plain. They would kind of be on their own in that instance, all like each one for himself. But in this instance, they're all enclosed, and because of their being enclosed and being forced to kind of spend time with one another, it results in people working together. Previously, while leaving town, they hardly got along. Now they have adopted one another's attitudes, listen to one another's instructions, and work together to make their home habitable. Habitable. This is where you see the thatch and the roofless cabin, like making it habitable, like somewhere to live in this little pine bough homemade cabin. And then secondly, and they work together, it does not, and also pleasant. The idea of the pleasantry of the, or pleasantness of the home is with Piney and Duchess working together to rearrange the interior and make it tasteful and a little bit more pleasant to their eyes or their feelings. And so it does not seem any of them do this merely for his or her own selfish sake. And so setting in this situation encourages the getting along with one another. The setting encourages people to feel for one another, and in other words, have empathy. And as a result, they appreciate one another even more. Plot. Night came, but not Mr. Oakhurst is the evidence. It brought the storm again and the whirling snow. Then the Duchess, feeding the fire, found that someone had quietly piled beside the hut enough fuel to last a few days longer. The tears rose to her eyes, but she hid them from Piney. This also shows empathy. Notice I just put this into the graphic organizer again because I've already committed myself to prove empathy and how the empathy builds friendships among people who otherwise might not be appreciated, as well as it shows those it's empathy for those who have been mistreated or harshly judged. So in this instance, rhetorical elements. In this instance, plot. Here, Oakhurst not returning is the climax of the story. Empathy is seen in the several facts of the plot here. Oakhurst left to ensure Tom's safety. Oakhurst apparently left fuel to help the rest of the group last a few days longer. Duchess, who was once a selfish, emotional basket case, here hides her tears to avoid Piney's distress. There are at least 3 different things just in this one part of the plot, the part relating to the climax and then the subsequent beginning of the falling action. And all of those, they show empathy, care for others. They also show their interreliance on one another and their support of one another and value of friendship as a result. And finally, rhetorical elements. In this case, I focused on symbolism. And here, the characters themselves are stereotyped characters throughout the entire story, which means they all are very symbolic characters. But also specifically, the Duchess, without knowing exactly why, felt relieved and putting her head on Piney's shoulder spoke no more. And so reclining, the younger and purer, pillowing the head of her soiled sister upon her virgin breast, they fell asleep. Sisterhood indicates that interreliance and friendship, that feeling of appreciation, but also this element as well. Stereotype characters are used as symbols throughout this story. Collectively, they all represent people are judged by others in society, but specifically in the instance of Duchess being relieved in Piney's inability to pray, followed by Duchess's pillowing herself on Piney, the author uses a character who symbolizes wrongdoing, Duchess, relying on another character who symbolizes purity, Piney, to show how the two really I'm not sure what I might have messed up there, really rely on one another for support, love, and renewal. So that interreliance, that friendship, that association, that empathy from one to the other, they really have built a valuable, strong friendship and feel appreciated as a result. So this is what the test is going to look like at the level 3 mark. You're going to see multiple choice items and a poem in the first section and that level 2 section. But what can you do to kind of prepare for that? Get to know the terms that are at the level 2 mark on the proficiency scale, and then take a look back at your level 3 to ensure that you do a fantastic job in proving to me that you can analyze theme in a complex text. And one last thing, if you would like to practice on your own before before the upcoming assessment, then what you can do is just go to the Scarlet Letter, type in PDF, and check out one of the online versions of the text. Project Gutenberg has a lot of Creative Commons licensed public accessible texts like the Scarlet Letter, and you can click on it and enter here. And I would just recommend you begin at a page that starts out a chapter. Chapter 1 is very much very descriptive. You'll notice it's very short. You could practice with it. You could practice with chapter 2. The beginning of the chapter is pretty solid to be able to use for a separate text and excerpt. You could go to chapter 3 and do the same thing here. And don't be bogged down by possibly not knowing a character. Obviously, if something is going to be pulled out of context or used as an excerpt, it's expected of you to be able to use what you do know just from that particular excerpt to be able to determine theme or possible themes of that text. So just go to this version of the book, or if you have a paper copy of the book, then that's fine as well. And go ahead and just select what I would recommend, one of those earlier chapters, not the custom house, that's kind of the introduction to the book, but select one of those early chapters like chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3, somewhere up to chapter 6, and see if you can go through that graphic organizer on your own and determine thematic idea, theme, that is a thematic message or statement, and then try to prove it with evidence of different literary elements, and then reason it out in your own words to connect that evidence to the literary element and the thematic statement that you have written. All right, make this good practice. This is great. A great opportunity to prepare for your test, and I promise you that if you do that, it will definitely come in very, very handy.